Guys, Mavuika's release date is near, and I assume most of you are eager to pull for her. In this video I will tell you all the secrets about maximizing her damage output on teams, ranging from builds you have to give to your support, to an investment priority list when it comes to pulling for new things in order to make her stronger, for both her main DPS and sub DPS role. Let's go. So, I will start from builds you have to give your supports on her main DPS teams, since that's the more relatable topic than going for constellations, signature weapons, or new characters. As a pyro attack scaling character that can trigger melt and vaporize reactions on her teams, Mavuika has access to pretty much every supportive artifact set in the game to increase her damage. The no-brainer choice is the Cinder City set you can give to every Nathan character to get a 40% pyro damage increase for her. Since you want at least one Nathan support to go on her teams in order to maximize her damage, you want this set to go on one of those unconditionally. The real puzzle starts after this. Besides Cinder City, there are mainly two types of artifact sets that go well on her teams, and those are Instructor that buffs Elemental Mastery, and a couple attack buffing ones in Noblesse Oblige and Tenacity to the Millelith. The puzzle is about figuring out which unit you should give which. It depends on the team, because these artifacts have some conditions to be activated. First of all, for Instructor, of course it's mostly useful on Vapor Melt teams, because it increases the team's Elemental Mastery by quite a lot for 8 seconds. In order to achieve that, the holder needs to trigger an elemental reaction, so you can't just put it on any unit mindlessly. Let's visualize a couple teams to make this a bit more clear. When talking about Vapor Melt teams, I'm mostly thinking of Furina Vape teams and Citlali Melt teams where you play 1 or 2 cryo units. Assuming you're giving Cinder City to a Nathan character, that leaves 2 slots open for characters that can hold Instructor. The thing with Instructor is that it's a supportive set that comes with no real benefits for the holder, and actually it has some detriments because it's a 4-star artifact set, so you won't be able to get high energy or offensive stats on it. As a result, it fits best on characters that don't need much in terms of stats, for example Bennett and the Furina or Rosaria teams. On the teams with both Citlali and Xilonen, it's a bit more complicated, because many times Bennett won't be able to trigger a reaction here. That's because while on other compositions he has a couple units that can set up elemental application for him to trigger a reaction, the same doesn't necessarily happen on this team. Citlali technically can, by using her abilities before his, but the thing with Citlali here is that you really want to use her right before Mavuika comes on field, as she's responsible for setting up her reactions through cryo application, and because she might be using a weapon like Trilling Tails, that strictly requires her to switch into Mavuika to give her attack bonuses. As a result, with only Xilonen and Mavuika possibly coming before him in the rotation, Bennett won't be able to use Instructor. Here is the solution. You can give Xilonen Instructor and Bennett Noblesse Oblige. This is doable because early in the rotation, Xilonen can trigger a reaction after someone else applies Pyro. Xilonen is even less demanding than Bennett in terms of stats, as she doesn't even need to use her burst to function, so that works well here. You could technically also give it to Citlali, which in truth sounds great for 2 reasons. First, since Instructor has short uptime, by giving it to a character that comes right before Mavuika in the rotation, you'd maximize its impact. Second, Citlali is an Elemental Mastery scaling character for the durability of her shield, so Instructor will be helping her out more than it does for Xilonen. However, here is the counter. For one, Citlali really struggles in terms of energy requirements if she's not holding Cinder City, since the latter provides her multiple energy refunds. This can be problematic enough for her to become super clunky on the team. Second, while Xilonen using the set won't provide much uptime of it by the time Mavuika goes on field, you really don't need much in that sense. The reason is that this is a very front-loaded team where Mavuika mostly triggers reactions at the start, and later on in the rotation overwhelms the cryo application with her pyro up. However, she will get an elemental burst melt and 2 charge attack melts at the start of her window, and Instructor should buff most of this damage even if used on Xilonen. You can give the remaining characters in the team attack buffing options. Even on relatively strong sub DPS like Furina, it's worth to give her Tenacity to buff Mavuika instead, as that increases her damage more than something like Golden Troop increases Furina's on this type of comp. For other compositions like Chevreuse Overload or Monopyro, it's more straightforward, as there is no need for Instructor here, so just give Cinder City to the Nathan character and attack buffing sets to the other characters. Obviously, if you use an Anemo character, they should use Viridis and Veneer, but this goes without saying really. And that's pretty much it for how you should build your supports. I could talk about the weapons also, but since this type of discussion includes some 5-star weapons, I'd rather talk about it in the next section, so the investment priority list. But before I talk about that, let me remind you that if you enjoy my channel but you haven't subbed yet, please consider doing so because it really makes me notice your support, and also go check my Instagram and TikTok accounts. When it comes to deciding which weapon or character you should pull to make your Mavuika stronger, there is one main thing you should keep in mind. Since she needs a Natran support to be used well on teams, your top priority should be to get a very good one. The ones she likes the most are Xilonen and Citlali. I would say that out of the two, Xilonen is typically the better pull because she gives her the most fighting spirit through her skill, and she also enables more teams for her. Citlali pushes Mavuika towards meld teams clearly, and even then her best teams include Xilonen still. Double cryo melt without Xilonen is really strong still, stronger than Xilonen's teams without Citlali in terms of ceiling, but I personally rank the flexibility Xilonen provides for her higher. Beyond that, the only 5-star unit I would recommend pulling for her is Furina, in case you want to play her vape teams. Anyway, the interesting part here is figuring out whether or not investing on Mavuika herself is more important than pulling new characters for her. Say you have, for example, Xilonen and Furina, and you can use her vape team as a result. Starting from here, you can decide between pulling Mavuika's signature and Citlali in order to increase her ceiling further. Assuming you have a free-to-play weapon on Mavuika, getting her signature will increase her damage enough on her best vape teams for them to be close to Citlali's team's free-to-play investment. However, the comparison leans more in Citlali's favor if you have strong weapons like Beacon of the Red Sea or Verdict on Mavuika instead, in which case Citlali's team pulls ahead quite significantly. The main argument in favor of the weapon is that it increases Mavuika's damage quite unconditionally. It is also a pull that will age better if Mavuika ever gets a team that is better than Citlali's compositions in terms of damage ceiling, so that's a thing to keep in mind. Alternatively, you might want to know if getting Mavuika's constellations is better than getting Citlali, and in this case, it depends. One thing that's true for sure is that Mavuika's constellation 1 has less value than Citlali, as it doesn't increase her damage nearly as much as Citlali can. However, one thing it does well is that it gets Mavuika closer to her Constellation 2, which is a massive damage increase, and this opens up another layer to this comparison, namely getting Mavuika's Constellation 2 on the Furina Xilonen team as opposed to getting her Constellation 1 plus Citlali on the Melt team. In this case, the situation is kind of flipped, because the Constellation 2 is just an absurd damage increase for Mavuika, but Citlali still has an advantage here at equivalent cost, and that's the signature weapon scenario. Of course, just like before, this can change a bit depending on whether or not you already have a 5-star weapon for your Mavuika, but as a rule of thumb, Citlali is still very cost efficient in terms of damage increase, while the Constellation 2 scenario increases Mavuika's floor damage more. So, just to summarize, getting Citlali is the most cost-efficient way to increase her ceiling damage, while getting her signature or constellations increases her floor more on a wide variety of teams. One last thing to talk about here is the investment of constellations or signature weapons on your supports. We're looking mostly at Furina, Xilonen and Citlali, so our main 5-star supports. If you want to get a 5-star weapon for these characters, that will be the signature weapon for Xilonen and Citlali and Key of Kajnitsuet for Furina. For the latter, this will be better than her signature for the team, since it provides elemental mastery bonuses. The comparison with free-to-play options on them is as follows. Xilonen sees the biggest bump in performance here, as her signature is significantly better than Favonius for the team. Citlali's signature is straight up not worth it in this sense, because Thrilling Tales, her best free-to-play option, kind of matches it in terms of damage amplification for Mavuika. The only advantage the signature provides is higher elemental mastery, so better shield, and more flexibility in terms of rotation, as it doesn't force you to use Citlali right before Mavuika like Thrilling Tales does, but overall I would say those things alone don't make it pull worthy. Next come the constellations for these characters. All of these units have pretty strong supportive constellations to say the least, but I won't stress you with extremely wordy descriptions here, but rather I will just give you the damage increase they can provide for Mavuika instead. As far as Constellations 1 goes, Citlali and Furina provide a similar damage increase here, while Xilonen doesn't at all, since her Constellation 1 does nothing in terms of damage increase. Constellation 2 wise, all of them provide something, but the clear winner here is Citlali. Citlali's Constellation 2 is honestly massive, as it increases the resistance reduction to Pyro and gives the carry 250 elemental mastery. It's honestly close to Mavuika's Constellation 2 in terms of impact, and this comes on top of the fact she has superior teams with Mavuika compared to Furina. I have to say, the more this video goes on, the more Hoyoverse appears evil for structuring the next patch banners this way. As a summary, if you want to maximize Mavuika's ceiling, the first priority is Xilonen, then Citlali, then her signature weapon, then her constellations, then Citlali's constellations, then Xilonen's signature, and then Xilonen's constellations. If you want your Mavuika to have a bigger floor on a wide variety of teams, then get Xilonen, then her signature and constellations, and then Citlali. And that's pretty much it for the main DPS part. For the sub DPS part, I won't talk about how to maximize her teams much, because she's often not the main star in these cases. So the discussion is more about how to maximize the carry's damage, and that might be Kinich, Molani, and so on. There are teams where she's dealing more damage than the carry, however, for example on teams that set up Vapor Melts for her, and in this case the situation is similar to her main DPS compositions. You give Cinder City to the Nathan support, and Instructor to a unit that doesn't take a big hit from hate being a 4-star set. The more interesting discussion here is deciding between her signature and constellations. Her Constellation 1 in particular is big here, because not only it provides a big attack increase for her, but it also extends the duration of her skill to 18 seconds by increasing her Night Soul points amount. It also increases her fighting spirit generation rate to the point she won't ever need a second Nathan character on teams to function. Note that the reason I didn't mention this last part for her main DPS role is because in that case her skill won't have much uptime regardless, so a self-generated fighting spirit amount won't change much. Typically, considering that having more fighting spirit also makes her support better, on top of offering a similar damage increase for her, that means that the Constellation 1 has a bigger pull priority than the signature. The Constellation 2 is similar in that sense. It provides her a big damage increase, but it also makes her support better by giving her skill a 20% defense reduction effect that gets applied to nearby enemies. Basically, what I do here is get her Constellation 1, then Constellation 2, and then, if you really want, her signature. And this concludes the sub DPS part, as well as the main content of the video. Mavuika is not an easy character to maximize, since there are a lot of ways you can upgrade your teams, but I hope that with the things I've shown you, I made your decisions a bit easier to make. And with this, I'm done for today. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe, and also go check the Citlali guide I made a few days ago. Bye bye.